Well, good morning, good afternoon, evening, nighttime, wherever you may be, somewhere in our lovely world. Thanks so much for joining us live here today for the one and only Serverless Office Hours. We are streaming live on the AWS Twitch channel, on YouTube Serverless Land, and also via LinkedIn Live. So wherever you're joining us from, you are absolutely more than welcome. My name is Julian Wood. I'm a developer advocate here within the serverless team at AWS, and I'm joined by the one and only Thorsten Höger. Thorsten, it's awesome to have you on Serverless Office Hours. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, wonderful.
Excellent. Well, I mean, you're a DevTools hero, and you've been, super strong in the community for years, an expert in all things automation, particularly with CDK, and the CEO of Tamo. So how did you land up doing what you're doing? What's your sort of story to be the Uber CDKer?
Yeah, so I started using CloudFormation when I started using AWS back in 2013. So quite a long time ago. And it was always, if it's not automated, it's not cloud. So automation is a thing that I'm doing more than 10 years now. It was always teasing service teams like, if it doesn't have CloudFormation support, it doesn't exist.
Yep.
And then when the CDK started, so before it was launched publicly, I was in the beta, being part of the AWS Hero program, and had the chance to try it out during all its alpha and beta phase, and hooked up since then.
Cool, fantastic. Well, we're going to obviously be talking a lot about CDK very shortly with Thorsten. But yeah, just looking back over the past week of the world of serverless on AWS. Last week we were all talking about serverless platform engineering. So Ran Eisenberg from CyberArk and Anton from AWS were just talking about some of the cool coding and tools, and just lots of general information about how you can make serverless successful in your organizations by being able to create these kind of platforms internally, which is super useful. So that's on youtube.com/serverlessland, along with all previous other Serverless Office Hours episodes. So yeah, I think I was looking today, it's 3.5 years worth of Office Hours, and some of them are evergreen and fantastic. So it's worth looking back and seeing if there's anything that could pique your interest. In terms of what's new, some Eventbridge Scheduler, if you're using that, which is a really great way to create huge amounts of schedules in the cloud. Well, of course, any metrics is always important. So the scheduler team has added some more API metrics for observability. And then, interestingly, I like this one for DynamoDB, now allows you to support a maximum throughput for on-demand tables. So people go, oh, DynamoDB is super scalable. Why would I need to have a maximum throughput? Well, if there are scenarios where you want to control your costs, or you have a downstream service that maybe can be overwhelmed by change events or things like that, this is another thing you can configure. So yeah, super helpful and maybe useful to you if you're in the world of DynamoDB. Compute blog posts, nothing particularly new over the past week. So, Ian and Tobias as one had a circuit breaker pattern using extensions and DynamoDB as well. So yeah, I love these interesting ways where you can build architectural patterns, not necessarily into your code, into your Lambda function code, but the sort of ancillary things that work around Lambda, and just build that as configuration, which is super cool. It is AWS Summit time at the moment. In fact, the Stockholm Summit was today. So if anyone was there, I hope you enjoyed it. Japan and Washington are coming up soon. So yeah, free technical events. I know behind the scenes, a lot of work has been going into making all the talks and the sessions and the booths and kind of things as interesting and relevant as possible. So yeah, I think there are going to be some more summits added during the year. So yeah, a great free event in the city near you, certainly worth having a look. But that's sort of the past week. But today we're talking about sort of simplifying serverless with the CDK. Thorsten, I mean, do you just want to level set with us here? What is the CDK and why would somebody want to use it?
Yeah, so the CDK, or the Cloud Development Kit in general, is a tool to abstract your infrastructure code by using high-level languages. So languages like TypeScript, Python, .NET. So not writing YAML or JSON or HCL or whatever, but writing a high-level programming language. And this is then done by using the full-blown object-oriented model. So every resource is an object or is an instance of a class. So you're composing classes together, you're calling methods on them to integrate them with each other. And that's what the CDK, or in this case, the AWS CDK, which is the CDK for CloudFormation, does. So why do I distinguish between CDK and AWS CDK? There's also a CDK TF, which renders to Terraform instead of CloudFormation, and CDKs, which is used to render Kubernetes deployment descriptors instead of other infrastructure code. And there's also Progen that we will touch during this session, which is basically a CDK for your repository. So it's not building infrastructure, it's building all the files in your repository, like the tsconfig and the package.json and the GitHub workflows and whatever.
Okay.
But it's always the same principle, writing code using object-oriented models to define what you want to have.
So this is a benefit, obviously, for people who are used to writing code, that they, first of all, don't need to learn another YAML or learn another programming language. They can literally build their infrastructure. And I'm using infrastructure in inverted commas because we are serverless office hours, and the link between your application artifacts and your infrastructure artifacts are a lot merged. But it means you can do it all in one language. And if you're used to writing your TypeScript or Python, that's going to be super helpful to you. Your teams are just going to be able to code in one kind of thing. And I know some people have been building some pretty impressive applications that they can just generate sort of on the fly or during deployment time, or build scripts, all these kind of things. Yeah, using Python, for example, or Java, or whatever language they're involved in. So I certainly see the appeal.
Yeah, and that's exactly the thing. You mentioned serverless being very hard to distinguish what is infrastructure, what is application. And that, I think, where the CDK really shines, because I think there is no difference. So your application is your business code and your infrastructure and everything, because the moment you're using things like step functions, what's business logic and what is infrastructure, it's the same.
Yeah. And event bridge rules, like an event bridge routing rule or a filter on an SQS queue, that's stuff you would normally write in code. Now it's part of your infrastructure, and expressing that infrastructure as code in your coding language is super useful.
Exactly.
Cool. And don't forget, we are here live. So send us your questions, send us the comments. We love to hear where you're from. I think we already have a good friend, Daniel, from Brazil. Thanks for joining us and learning, as we all are. And also Praveen Allen, how are you from New York? Nice of you to join us. There is, schizophrenic web developer. Interesting name. Thanks for joining us. I always have problems with CDK and SDK. So is that just a naming thing in terms of what it is, or do you fundamentally have an issue with how the different things work? I'm happy to find out more about that. And just a quick one from Alpa Codes. Always welcome to have you. Always nice to have you back, Alpa Codes. No CDK support in App Composer, correct? And that is correct. At the moment, App Composer doesn't allow you to export CDK code, but I have no insight knowledge on what the team is working on for that, but I'm pretty sure there'll be cool things that are possible in the future. Hopefully, holding thumbs. That's thumbs.
Yeah, it's also an interesting thing, because App Composer is combining all the resources in AWS, but CDK shines through these abstractions, and that would not be really easy with App Composer. So how could we group things together to these higher level constructs like the L2s and L3s in CDK? I think that's why the App Composer CDK thing is like, it's possible to generate only the minimal level of CDK, but not the higher level things. And that's maybe why they just didn't do it yet.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, just a last one we'll get to. Explorer, I like the name. Okay, tell me more about SAM versus serverless CDK. So I know some people would say there is a fundamental divide between these kind of things. But yeah, Thorsten, what is your take on when you would use, or maybe when you would use, whether it's SAM or serverless framework, which is a sort of YAML-based infrastructure descriptive language, versus something like CDK?
So I think for SAM or serverless, that's just what people prefer. With both of them versus CDK, is exactly the thing about one is the YAML and one is the higher level programming language and the object orientation. So I think that's the thing. And it's not mutually exclusive. So the SAM resources can also be used in CDK. So all the SAM stuff is CloudFormation. So you can use the SAM resources in your CDK app. But normally you don't do it because it's an abstraction on an abstraction that is not really necessary, but it is possible.
But technically, SAM is generating CloudFormation. CDK is generating CloudFormation under the hood. Just two different approaches to solve the different kind of problems. I know, some teams, if you're working on teams that are sort of heavily involved in DevOps, and the team sort of owns their own destiny, and they involved in building all of their infrastructure themselves and deploying it, CDK is great because they're working in the tools they're working on the day-to-day together. But sometimes if you've got bigger application teams that maybe have infrastructure managed by some other team, and maybe they not sufficient to be able to understand all the languages in your company, Java, .NET, Python, Node, or that kind of thing. Some people are maybe going to support it or prefer a YAML-based model because they don't want the expressiveness that a CDK can kind of bring. So two different kind of things, and you can mix and match them. I mean, I've seen great examples, for example, where people using SAM or Terraform or those kind of things to deploy VPCs and RDS databases and all of those kind of more static things that are not going to change as often. And then you see CDK for a lot of their serverless constructs and a lot of their application level things that they're going to put together. And the two work really well together. So
yeah, exactly. And that's also, I think, what you had last week with the platform. What I see often is that platform teams using Terraform, for example, to build all the infrastructure because they need to interconnect with Direct Connect and their on-prem stuff and whatever. Yeah. And then application teams using CDK to build their applications in this platform.
Yeah, and definitely. And as Daniel says, not about it's not about verse, it's just about together or different options. And then Explorer again, CDK Synth also generates CloudFormation. Can it be used as part of SAM? Well, there's a slight nuance there because SAM is actually two different parts. SAM is the transform, which generates the CloudFormation. And I don't think you would either use CDK or you'd use the SAM transform to generate the CloudFormation. But SAM is also CLI, which allows you to test, debug, locally invoke, all those kind of things for serverless applications. And you can do that CLI stuff also with part of the CDK output. So a bit of a nuance there when we're talking about SAM. There are two different parts of it.
Yeah, and there was one more question. Just one sentence to it about deploying to a fleet of accounts.
Yes, I did miss that.
The simplest thing is to use a stack set because CDK bootstrapping or CDK toolkit is just a CloudFormation stack. You can use the template and create a stack set that is rolled out to your whole organization, and all the accounts will be bootstrapped.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Besen, for joining us via YouTube. Yeah, sorry, I did spot that, and then went in the list of comments. So. Cool, excellent. Well, Thorsten, I know you have some things you want to show us, so we will, love to jump on that. Let me bring up your slides.
Yeah, so it's about simplifying serverless. So we talked about CDK is already simplifying everything, but still there are things that, especially with a serverless application, you need to do. And what often people say, yeah, I don't like serverless because of it's so complicated. No, it's not complicated. It just surfaces complicated things that are otherwise done somewhere else. So talking about a Spring Boot, you also have your controllers, but they're defined in Java. Now with a serverless application, you have to define them somewhere else, but it's the same thing. It's just moving parts within your application. But in my case, it's all started with, I want to create an API gateway. I want to have Lambda functions for all the routes and methods. Nor in serverless, nor in CDK, like adding another Lambda function, adding another Lambda function, adding another Lambda function. So that's why I started writing this tool, I think it's now 2 or 3 years ago, and it evolved to some kind of contract-driven development for CDK. So I have an open API spec. I have a workflow state language definition. I have a DynamoDB one-table schema file. So I already have schema files. I want to generate the whole infrastructure for that automatically based on this template. So that is where it all started. I don't want to repeat all the information that is in my open API spec inside my infrastructure code because it's already there.
Yeah. So it's about, again, integrating those different things together. You already have an open API spec, and not having to recreate all of that in CDK. You just want to combine the two together and be able to import things from other standards that you already use.
Exactly. So we already talked about me, so I'm doing a lot of CDK stuff. So as I said, it's simplifying the creation and management of serverless applications. And it's using different tools under the hood. So it's using CDK, it's using Progen, I already mentioned that, to build your application or to build your project, because you want to have all these Lambda functions, but they need to be generated somewhere. So Progen is used to generate stubs for all your handlers, for example, and things like that. But we will go into detail for that. We already talked a bit about CDK and Progen. as I said, CDK is infrastructure as code framework. Progen is the tool for managing your project configuration itself. So I think instead of just going through these slides, what we already did, I just wanted to show one or two things because we have to put GenAI somewhere, and these images are generated using GenAI. So we can go beyond this topic of GenAI and then go into the code.
There we go. Well, we've kept everybody happy. I don't think you're allowed to do a live stream at the moment without talking about GenAI. So we've ticked that box, and
we've ticked that box. We generated some images,
cool.
so we can go into code.
But I mean, the interesting thing is actually not to be too flippant. I mean, things are progressing so fast in the GenAI space that actually generating CDK code using GenAI, is going to be, I think, a very powerful thing going forward.
Yeah, I think that will happen during this demo because obviously I've installed Q for your IDE in my VS Code, so there will be code popping up. Let's see if it's good code or not, but there will be code. So what do we do? So what you want to do is start a new CDK project. We are starting from a plain CDK project using Progen, which is npx Progen new. So we're creating a new project using Progen. And it's an AWS CDK app in TypeScript. This will initialize our whole project. And that's now exactly where Progen shines. It's creating this project for us, but it's not a template that's generated once. It's really owning these files. So whatever we want to change, we can change it in the Progen RC file, and it will recreate all the files in the way we need them to be. So if we add a feature, it will reconfigure npm ignore, git attributes, git ignore files. Do we want to add this file or not? And so on and so forth. So that's what
I haven't actually used Progen myself, so I was interested to learn about it as a wrapper to make the sort of project management side of it easier.
Yeah, and we already see this. So if I now remove something from this file and want to save, it's like, yeah, no, don't do this. This is a read-only file. So all the files are read-only by Progen. We are not meant to change anything besides this file. This is the Progen RC where we are adding stuff. So let's go to a newer version of CDK. So 2.1 is like 3 years old. Let's not do that. And now the interesting thing is we want to add one dependency, which is our tool, CDK Serverless. By running npx Progen, we can regenerate everything. So out of this project definition, it will regenerate all files that are needed. In this case, it will be the package JSON, and then we'll install all the tools that are needed. So we see in package JSON, it now added CDK Serverless. And we didn't do any yarn install, yarn add, npm, whatever. So what we now want to do is we don't want to use a normal CDK TypeScript app. We want to use the serverless project that's coming out of CDK Serverless. So let's do another import from CDK Serverless. Out of the Progen modules, it's the serverless project. It's a drop-in replacement in this case because it just derives from the CDK app, so we can keep everything else like that. It just helps us by adding more dependencies that we need. So rerunning Progen, which is something we do a lot. Every time we change something, we just rerun Progen. That's why from now on, I will not type npx Progen anymore. I aliased it to PJ. So because I'm running this command like a million times a day. So now we have this project, it's there. It added some more dependencies like, yeah, we need ES builds to build our Lambda functions. We need UUID generation. We want Cognito identity pools and stuff. And all this is managed for us. We don't need to care about that. But now it's just Progen. And now the magic comes in with CDK Serverless. So setting the scene, what do we want to do? We want to create a simple to-do app, which has a list to do, get to do, add to do, remove to do, and store it in DynamoDB. So the architecture is an API gateway, 4 Lambda functions hooked up to the routes, talking to a DynamoDB table. We can do this, but then we need to create 4 new Lambda functions, hook them up, creating the routes, creating the methods in API gateway. It's a lot of code, even with CDK. So instead of doing that, let's say we want to have a new data store. This class is coming from my CDK Serverless project. And let's say we want has exactly 2 options. What's the data store definition file and what's the name of the model? You can have multiple models, so having multiple DynamoDB tables. I'm calling it my model. And that's the moment where Q sometimes helps and sometimes it doesn't. So I did like, we create a new data store, we call it my model, and it will be defined in source definitions mymodel.json. Rerunning progen and watching the source folder, some things happened. The definition file was created because, oh yeah, you want to use this file, but it's not there yet. So I will help you by, here's a sample one. Do whatever you want with it.
Wow.
That's not the one we want to use. So I will copy the one I want to use for this project, which is using, I want to have a primary index with PKSK, a global secondary index, a local secondary index, and a to-do model with several fields. I don't want to go into detail about this thing itself because that's more than a DynamoDB talk. What it is using is the single table design model to put all the stuff into one table with prefix and compound keys and things like that. I change it, I put it in there. So this is my source of truth for my database model. Now rerunning everything, we see there's 2 generated files already. So one is a construct. So it already created a CDK construct for me that I can use in my application that contains the model. So I don't need to new DynamoDB table with this is my attributes, this is my indexes, and all the things I need to specify. I don't need to do that because it's already in my model file. So this is generated for me. I can just do new my model data store. Everything is done.
Wow, that is powerful. That's
and the same goes for the model itself. So a lot of constants, because yeah, we know how the keys are named, how the fields are named. Please create constants for that. I don't want to do this all the time. And it's also creating, using the SenseDB DynamoDB1 table class, it's instantiating an ORM with entities and type safety and all the things. I can just do to-do.find.get, whatever, and it's a fully type safe model out of my schema. So going back to my application, this is my CDK application. I will now say I want to, oh, not here. I want to create a data store. So I am saying my model data store with the CDK triple scope ID and options. And options are very, very, yeah. It's not a lot to configure. We can enable encryption if we want. Everything else is derived from our specification because we already have the model. We don't need to specify how this DynamoDB table should look like. Everything is done. Next thing we want to do is create a REST API. So let's say new REST API out of the serverless project. Same things. Name of the API and definition file. API. Oh, Q learns.
Yeah.
It's my REST API and it's my REST API.json. Let's run ProGen again and watch the source folder. Oh, stuff is happening. It created a sample OpenAPI spec, but we also want to replace this with the serverless demo. It has a to-dos with get for the list and with post to create a new one. Important thing is we need to specify an operation ID because that will be used as a identifier for the Lambda function name and for the file names and so on. And it has the aforementioned operations. Getting to-dos, adding to-dos, getting one to-do by its ID and remove a to-do by its ID. Re-rendering our project. 2 files are created. One is another construct, which is not that fancy. The fanciness happens within this thing. It's referencing generics here. So we get a type-safe CDK construct now based on the types and operations and path in our OpenAPI spec. And it's also creating the data model out of the schema of the OpenAPI spec. This is leveraging the normal OpenAPI TypeScript model that's already, or library that's already there. So what we can now do is say, I want to have a new my REST API. And we can specify stuff here, like, okay, this is called dev. We want to have course, so it does automatically do all the stuff we need for cross-origin resource sharing, like adding all these option calls that you need and mocking them correctly, differentiating between authenticated calls, responding with the origin that was called. So because you cannot use a star for origin, for authenticated calls and all the things, it's all done for you.
Just that is worth its weight in gold, I think.
I want to use a single table data store for it. Then it also hooks up all put and post and delete calls will have write access to the database. All get calls will have read access to the database. That's done for you. You can do additional things. You can say, I want to have it on this domain. Then it's creating all the custom domains, the certificates, and everything for you. But I think that should be enough for now. And if we now do a CDK synthesize, which means let's render this CDK code into CloudFormation. And we see another folder was created. It's called Lambda. It has a lot of files in it. Let's make that a bit bigger. You can get rid of the hello world one. This was from before. Now the difference is all the other files are owned by ProGen. We are not meant to touch them. This is here, generated by ProGen. Do not edit this file. This is regenerated on every run. The Lambda files are not. The Lambda handlers are generated once if they don't exist, but now they will not be touched anymore. So now we can add our code and do whatever we want with them. They're just scaffolded for us, so we don't need to write this code. And all this was automatically derived from the OpenAPI spec by its operation ID. So for every operation, we get one file that's exporting a handler function, and it's using some tooling to make it type safe.
Oh, yeah.
So the data here already knows what this is. This is a typed object coming in here according to the OpenAPI spec. For get to-dos, we know what we need to return. So if we do return here, that's not correct, because you see, this needs to be the list of to-dos, not an object. So this already knows how things should look like. So you get all this type safety by using this auto-generated code and all these helper and utility functions that are coming in here.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the reason you're using TypeScript in the first place, is for your type safety, and to have this just right in your IDE and all the way through. So you've got your type safety within your API spec and straight through to your Lambda function, all tied together. Yeah, super useful.
Exactly, and also to the DynamoDB. So So if I now want to save this into the DynamoDB, it's like awaiting to-do dot create, and I need to put in one object, and it has a title, which is data title, description is description. Let's create an ID and so on, but it's type safe to this point, and then it stores in the database. And that's the whole function code. Like, yeah, we are adding 4 more attributes here, but that's basically adding a to-do into the database. Everything else is type safe, it's mapped with an ORM. It has all the things that we need. And that's what makes it very, very fast to write applications. So if I'm writing a new application for a customer, or a lot of this internal tooling, like, yeah, we need an application to do some kind of administrative task. Yeah, you can spend some month creating a new application for that, or you can say, yeah, this is the spec, go on. And within a day, you can create an application, a whole application. But at this point, maybe let's take some questions, or if you have some questions. It was a lot of information at once.
Yeah, no, certainly. Well, I think that's sort of one of the meta comments from the problem solver XXX. It seems the more time passes, the less code we'll write. This saves so much time. Nice. And that's it. And I like the way sort of Progen abstracts it away and tells you, don't, this is just background. Well, this is stuff that's important, but don't edit this. I'm going to create this on your behalf, so you don't go and mess stuff up, mess any stuff up.
Yeah, but a very important thing is, and that is the same. It's true for Lambda code. It's true for all the generated stuff here, but all the other things that Progen creates, or pipelines, it generates them for you. It owns them, but they are still files in your repository. Yeah. It's not creating something on the fly during pipeline run, which would be non-deterministic and not really safe. So it generates everything the way you want it to be. But if you just drop out of Progen from one day to the next, your project still works because it's a normal TypeScript project.
Yeah. The Progen is just doing the helpful scaffolding and the project management of it. But ultimately, when it's deployed, there's no concept of Progen. It's just the concept of, this is stuff that's happening in TypeScript. And in fact, to the next level, which is just going to generate CloudFormation, which is then going to generate resources. So it's sort of all abstracted, but you've got full visibility all the way down. Obviously, you're still going to have TypeScript in your Lambda code, but the rest.
And maybe that's the reason why I wrote this thing. So we're looking at the current CloudFormation file, which has 1,300 lines.
Yeah.
Coming from that.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I mean, we all know, CloudFormation is super powerful because you can generate absolutely everything in that, like assembly code kind of thing. But yeah, the days of generating that manually are, well gone. And we've seen that with many of the other frameworks. And yeah, taking this to another level is amazing.
Yeah. And just because there was a question about how to do authorization.
Yep. Yeah, thanks. Happy Hapsy. I like that one. Thanks for joining us via Twitch. How would I add Cognito Authorizer for the API?
There's the authorizers. It doesn't pop up. Cognito authentication. So
it's just so easy to find the models as well. They're all, all in the autocomplete as well.
So the minimum configuration would be new Cognito authentication. You need to specify a name because I hate that Cognito has random names and I have no idea what this is. So I'm forcing users to give it a name, which contradicts my normal pattern of don't name things. But with Cognito, please name things. It's a data store. You can also automatically create some groups for it, and it will create the groups for you. You can say, I want to have some triggers set up. So I want to have the pre-token generation be set up, which is just, I want to have it. Let's see what happens here. And then for the API, we say our authentication is this object. Let's re-render. Things happened. So first of all, a new Lambda function was created, cognito.pretoken generation, where we can now add our code for pre-token generation. It's already hooking up everything. It's configuring SES, depending on what you configure for sending emails and sending notifications and things like that. Now for Cognito authorizers, for reasons, I decided not to use the native Cognito authorizer here, because I don't want to do authentication only. I also want to do authorization. And this needs to be done in your function code, because creating a policy that knows everything and does all the authorization is just basically not possible.
Yeah.
So I moved everything into the Lambda function. So what I can now do is like, okay, adding a to-do should not be public. So let's do context.auth assert this should be an admin, which automatically asserts that there is a Cognito dot token, it has the admin group set, and so on and so forth. I can do other things. That's part of this helper token, helper utils that comes out of CDK Serverless. I can say asserting that it's authenticated at all, assert that it's an admin, assert that it's a certain group. I can automatically have, okay, give me the email, give me the groups, give me the subject out of this token. So parsing the token is part of the utilities of this library. And assertion automatically means it's abstracting away a lot of stuff for you. So if it's not part of this group, it automatically throws a 403 forbidden error for you. And it stops processing. So you don't need to wrap it in ifs or whatever. It just stops execution and throws a not authenticated error of forbidden, and that's it.
That's perfect. So, what sort of resources are included within the CDK for serverless, and where does sort of boundaries exist in terms of what you can work with?
What else does exist? So there is the construct for an asset CDN, which is basically an S3 fronted with a CloudFront. Okay. That is meant for, this is where I store assets for my application, because you should not stream binaries through Lambda and API gateway. Yeah. So it's like sending a redirect, and here's the asset CDN for that. It has the REST API and also a GraphQL API, so you can choose. For the GraphQL API, you give the GraphQL schema file, and it behaves exactly the same as the REST API. So full type safety of all the mutations, queries, subscriptions, and all the things. And then it has a construct of a Lambda function, which is used under the hood for all the stuff, but you can also generate your new Lambda function. Automatic ES build bundling using the Node.js function out of CDK, okay, but with more stuff. So it automatically knows about things. It has helper methods for grant write to database, because it knows the database. Grant sending emails, because it configures SES for you. Grant Cognito read. And so all the things that you can build with CDK Serverless have these methods of, I'm creating IAM for you. REST API, single table data store, we had this, and workflows. So step functions, we talked about that. If you provide a step function definition, it will create a step function construct for you that has all the variables that are defined within your workflow definition as parameters of your CDK construct.
Okay. So how do you think about
the function and things like that?
People who are creating step functions workflow, I know there's sometimes a debate of whether they should be, creating the actual step functions workflow within ASL within CDKs in all the individual steps and the if-then statements, choice, map state, all those kind of things, or should that step functions definition be an ASL file, and then you reference that as part of your infrastructure within the CDK stack. So the CDK stack will create a step function state machine based on an ASL file. Or how do people think about actually creating all the individual steps with CDK as well?
I think 2 years ago, it was like, yeah, let CDK do that because you don't want to write ASL.
Yeah.
But now with Workflow Studio and it being part of App Composer, and by that, it should also be working within VS Code, you want to have ASL files because then you can use the whole technology of App Composer and Workflow Studio to write it, which is up to date. It has all functionality. We don't need a million tickets of please add this step to CDK. Write it in an ASL file, import it. You can reference, even with the native CDK, you can reference a definition file from your local file system, and it's creating this for you, uploading to S3, creating assets for you, everything done by CDK, and reference this ASL file and do replacement within, like, this is a real ARN that you need to call for a Lambda function. But the model itself is an ASL file. Same reason as with why using OpenAPI, why using one schema, why using GraphQL schema. You want to give this to somebody else. Somebody else, in the case of an API, maybe a front-end developer. In the case of a workflow, maybe the business department want to have a look at this. So you can give them the ASL file, they open it up in an App Composer, and they see what's happening. They can do slight modifications and give you a new ASL file because it's the shared contract that we agreed on and not some random code inside CDK.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction to tease out there. What you said now and what I said slightly earlier about when I was talking about the reasons versus a YAML-based deployment or creation mechanism and something like CDK is that competing priorities of what people want and whether they want to have everything in their application code or they want to have everything on the sort of infrastructure side based in YAML. And I think this sort of highlights the nuance of this and how you can have the best of both worlds, where you can have your CDK code to create all of your infrastructure, but use those open APIs or your ASL files behind the scenes, so someone else can come in, an operations person or a new developer working maybe even in another different language, and they just be able to pick up that GraphQL schema, for example, and they could go and create something in Python, for example, without having to sort of unpick all of the complicated work that may have been done within CDK to then go and export that to different kind of things. So working within your microservice, you build all of your nice CDK code, but that sort of anything that's API or contractual to another external service, you've got not maybe say everything, but a few things. You keep those in the sort of source material. I like that.
Exactly. That's the thing. The moment you talk with other people, you should have a common language. Like we're now doing this in English and not in German, what I can do, but maybe not you. So that's why we do a common language. And that's the same for API specs, for workflows. We talk to other people with them.
Excellent. Yeah, I do like that. Jagdish, who's joining us via YouTube. Yeah. How do I organize the generated code? And maybe the question is, do you need to organize the generated code, or, I suppose what's the more advanced things if you need to customize anything?
So there's different levels of organization. So one is, I like to call the folder where I put all my definitions. So it's somewhere. This is something that was up to me because I put a name here. What CDK Serverless is doing, everything that it generates to be regenerated, it puts into a folder called generated, which makes it easy because that's what I meant with using Progen. The git ignore was modified to contain all these as git ignores, like they should be integrated, but with attributes, they are marked as this is auto-generated, which means that things like GitHub will not show diffs on them. Because, this auto-generated code, we don't care about the diff. So all the things are happening. And so everything that can be regenerated is in the generated folder. You should not touch anything in this folder. Reading, yes. Writing, not. And then if it creates Lambda functions, it's putting it in a Lambda folder. If it's creating VTL files for GraphQL, it's putting it in a VTL folder. If it's creating JS resolvers, it's putting it into a JS resolver folder. And within this folder, it's naming things like, what is it? It's, in this case, it's a REST API. The name of the API we specified as the API name, the operation ID, and the file. So there is some structure in this generated stuff. But then it depends if you need more. So I have applications with like 50, 60 Lambda functions. It works. I'm doing this. If it doesn't work anymore, maybe it's not a microservice anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. This is just CDK code, so you can put these. It's just importing these TypeScript files from various files. You can put them in subfolders. You can do whatever you like. This is just a folder structure over here. You're not going to break anything crazy by moving some files around for organization. But yes, as with all things, great power comes a little bit of responsibility, and having huge CloudFormation stacks or having huge CDK files is also going to trip you up and make it harder to maintain.
Yeah. So I see three more interesting questions. So the one is about CI/CD. Yes and no. So yes, with Progen, you can generate a lot of files. So you can also generate pipelines. So it can create GitHub workflows, GitLab workflows. There's CDK pipeline within CDK to build code pipeline stuff. To bring these things together and do more automation of coming from a general understanding, there's another project I'm working on, which is too much to tackle in the next 12 minutes, but I think the link should be there, is Progen pipelines. So it's another tool I'm building on top of Progen that is meant to, I define what my pipeline should look like, and then it renders to GitHub, GitLab, Code Catalyst, CDK code pipeline, whatever I configure, and it's rendering these things in an opinionated way. So you can build your own pipeline however you want, but if you want to have an opinionated way, it might not be the best way or the perfect way, but it's a way that works. And I know that it works because I'm running it in a lot of projects. And it works. And you can use this, you can generate your pipeline. Yeah, and that's it.
Okay, and there was another question, and I had sort of had a previous question as well, is about testing all this infrastructure, and even your thoughts on how much do you test? Ultimately, if the infrastructure is going to deploy, partly that's going to be a successful test, and there is a difference between testing your actual application code where your business logic is running, and this is your so-called infrastructure code. How do you think about that, and where testing should sit?
Yeah, for testing, there's two things. One is the unit tests. And then we're talking about, it's a Lambda function. The Lambda function is a TypeScript file in my repository with a handler. I can call it from jest. The only things that are a bit problematic is the moment you talk to databases, because you need to mock them at the right point. So jest and mocks and things like that might be a bit tricky, but it's just the normal way of testing your business logic code. It's not different using my tool. The other thing is integration testing. And to help with that, I'm currently working on something. So it's not in this code, I think. Let's see. No, it's not yet there. I'm right now working on that part. The moment what CDK Serverless is doing for you, it's creating a lot of CloudFormation outputs. So all the things that you need for your tests are marked as CloudFormation outputs, like the domain name and the stage and all the things that you need, the table name, the buckets that it creates. And CDK is able to write this to a file. And then my intake tests can take this file and provide you with some kind of intake test util. So you instantiate and say, I want to have my intake tests activated. This is the output file with the real infrastructure. Like this is the test database and so on and so forth. And then it has method like, give me a client. And it's creating an Axios client for you to call the REST API. And it knows the base URL. Or give me an authenticated client for this user. And it's creating a user for you in the Cognito and then logging in and after test, deleting the user for you incognito again. So utilities to simplify writing unit tests or integration tests, like give an authorized client, do this call, go to the database, check these 3 things, and tear everything down. Should be like 10 lines, because I can generate some utils for you because I know about the infrastructure you're building. And that's the idea of what I'm working on currently.
Wow, yeah, that is super interesting. How do you think about observability and metrics and monitoring and all that kind of stuff? And maybe that's not necessarily related to the tool, but how that's an important part of scaffolding your applications. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so observability is very, very important. Some vendors already have their own tooling integrated in CDK. So you can just add an aspect in CDK to say, yeah, please monitor all my Lambda functions using vendor XYZ. And then it's doing that for you. And I don't interfere with that, but I don't prevent it. So you can just hook up any provider, say, for every Lambda function at this layer, rewrite the handlers, and everything works out of the box. For monitoring, that's another pull request that's currently in a draft state by another contributor, is using the CDK monitoring constructs from AWS, which is an additional CDK library that contains proven defaults, best practices monitoring to integrate this automatically. So whenever you create a new REST API, you get a dashboard for this API. When you create a new DynamoDB table, it's creating a dashboard for this table for you. So this is the plan to also automate this inside CDK Serverless. So the moment you say, I want to have a new data store, you get a dashboard for that. I want to have a new API, you get a dashboard for that.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, because obviously saying defaults about checking your read and write capacity units for DynamoDB, or your throttles for Lambda, or your any 400s or 500s for API gateway. Yeah, these are understood best practices, and surfacing them up in your creation is great.
Yeah, and the third thing that is not yet in the works but planned is integrating Power Tools for Lambda.
Okay.
So having it natively in CDK Serverless, because currently there are some things that are similar to it because Power Tools was not there when I started it, but I can rewrite as use the logger from Power Tools, use the metrics from Power Tools, and then integrating Power Tools for Lambda inside this tool. So all the handler you write use Power Tools under the hood.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I love Power Tools. I think they're doing so much good work to, especially on the observability place, but not just that, from sanitizing inputs to secrets management to item potency, a whole bunch of tools, and bringing that all together. Yeah, I'm hoping that's going to be even more helpful and useful.
Yeah, as I said, validating inputs could be automated because I know the model, so I could generate glue code to validate it using Power Tools for you, and it's just using Power Tools validation, and you don't know it because it's just there.
Yeah, exactly, and it's type saved all the way through, and you can do your input sanitization and all that kind of checking really good. Now, I think Happy Hapsy just says, yeah, this is awesome. This will save so much time. So you've alluded to some of the things. Just briefly, sort of what's coming down the pipe, or what would you like help on anything? You're mentioning some community involvement in anything. What would you like to see to be able to drive this forward?
Yeah, definitely. So definitely looking forward to, if anybody wants to use it, feel free. If anybody wants to help, feel free. Currently, it's living under my brand name. It's not meant to be a paid product, and you're contributing to some proprietary stuff. We are currently running or starting a new community library for CDK with the Open Constructs Foundation. And I'm planning on moving the CDK serverless and approach and pipelines to the Open Constructs Foundation in the future.
Okay.
So it will be part of the Constructs Foundation. It just was there before, and it needs to be, it's a thing of timing, but it should be a true foundation-owned thing. So happy to accept contributions. As I said, things down the line is integration testing, dashboards, and the Power Tools. But whatever ideas come up, happy to look into that.
Okay, and just here briefly, Miguel Espiga, thanks for joining us via LinkedIn. Can Lambda options be configured? Memory size, snap start, regions, etc.
There's two ways you can say Lambda options and configure all the Lambda options, and they are for all the Lambda functions. Or you can say okay, this is my API, API.get function for operation. And then I get type safety again for which operation. So yeah, for the get to-dos. And that's where I have all these grant methods like, oh, I want to, the get to-dos should also be able to invoke a URL or read an asset or send emails or whatever. So this is where I can add the Lambda function or change the Lambda function. Or if it's about options again, I mentioned the Lambda options. There's also Lambda options by operation. And then you can say, for the get to do by ID, I want to have these special configurations that are only true for this one Lambda function. And this is just using normal CDK Lambda options or Lambda properties. So you can do whatever CDK allows you to do on Lambda functions. Yeah, mem size, location, and all the things.
Perfect, thank you. And yeah, Thorsten, just before we say goodbye, I know you were also the one of the writers of the exceptional book, the CDK book. So that's one of the resources to find more about CDK. But yeah, is there anything else we haven't covered today that you'd like to chat about?
I don't think, as I said, the Open Construct library is, if you want to build your own CDK constructs and you want to bring them to the public, we are happy to be a community-owned library that's collecting reusable code for CDK that is not part of the CDK core library by AWS, and to grow it from there and to be of use for the community, especially looking into regulation and the things where you cannot just install random code from the internet.
Absolutely. So Thorsten, that has been a super highlight, I think, for anybody who's building in TypeScript and the CDK. This is going to be super useful. I love how individual programming languages are just getting more and more immersed with how to build serverless applications and sort of deeper into the code, but less code and abstracting even more. And I think it's just going to be super powerful going forward. So yeah, thank you very much for showing us everything you've got today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Excellent. And don't forget also that we're here, same time, same place next week. And we're actually talking all about serverless education with another serverless, or another hero, this time a serverless hero, Rossius and Dinmo4, talking about EduCloud Academy. And I've been hearing great things about EduCloud Academy. So yeah, this will be great to learn about how you can take your serverless training to the next level with lots of workshops and everything. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us today, Thorsten. Really appreciate your time and your knowledge and expertise. There are lots of links in the show notes. So yeah, to pick up on all the projects that Thorsten has been talking about. This would be great. Thank you very much.